I'm Audrey Bennett, 34 years old, and I never thought I'd see my own brother try to have me arrested. Arrest her? She stole everything. Derek shouted, his face turning crimson as he pointed at me across the executor's office. I remained seated, oddly calm despite the chaos. The manila envelope in Harold Reynolds' hands contained Grandpa Malcolm's real will, not the forgery Derek had presented. And somewhere in the building was a flash drive with security camera footage that would change everything. Before I tell you how my brother's schemes spectacularly unraveled, let me know where you're watching from the comments below, and hit that like and subscribe button to join me on this wild journey of family betrayal and justice. My grandfather, Malcolm Bennett, was the kind of man they write books about. Born in a small town in Pennsylvania to working-class parents, he built his fortune from literally nothing but determination and grit. By the time I was born, Bennett Construction was responsible for half the commercial buildings in our city. But Grandpa never forgot where he came from. Money is just a tool, Audrey. He'd tell me during our Sunday afternoon chess games in his study. It's what you build with it that matters. His office always smelled like leather and that distinctive cologne he ordered from England. I can still picture the warm mahogany shelves lined with books he'd actually read, not just displayed. My brother Derek was 5 years older than me, and from the beginning, we couldn't have been more different. While I was content with my weekly allowance, Derek always needed more. He'd blow through his money buying the newest gadgets or impressing whatever girl he was dating that month, then come asking for advances. You're teaching that boy the wrong lessons, Grandpa would tell my parents, Linda and Howard. Dad would just shrug it off. He's finding his way, Pop. Not everyone can be as disciplined as you were at that age. Mom tried her best to treat us equally, but even she couldn't ignore the fundamental difference in our approaches to life. I saved, Derek spent. I worked summer jobs at the construction company filing paperwork and learning the business. Derek lounged by our pool complaining about the heat. When I turned 18, Grandpa took me to lunch at his favorite steakhouse downtown. I've set up accounts for both you and your brother, he explained between bites of his medium-rare ribeye. College, first home, business startup if you want it. Same amount for both of you. That's very generous, Grandpa, I said, genuinely touched. He pointed his fork at me. But there's a difference. Your brother's money is in a trust that pays out for specific expenses. Yours is direct access. Why? I asked, though I already knew. Because you've shown me I can trust your judgment, he said simply. For years later, I graduated with a business degree and used some of my fund to open a small interior design firm specializing in commercial spaces. It was the perfect complement to Grandpa's construction business, and we often collaborated on projects. Meanwhile, Derek had dropped out of 3 colleges and was finding himself on extended vacations that Grandpa reluctantly funded through the trust. By the time Derek hit 30, he'd launched and bankrupted 2 businesses, a nightclub that lost its liquor license within 6 months, and a luxury car rental service that mysteriously saw half its fleet damaged beyond repair. Each failure was followed by heated arguments in Grandpa's study, with Derek storming out and Grandpa looking more disappointed than angry. He just doesn't get it, Audrey. Grandpa confided in me after one particularly nasty blowout. Money without purpose is just paper. My business thrived, partly because of my connection to Bennett Construction, but mostly because I worked 80-hour weeks and poured everything into building something lasting. By 34, I had 15 employees and had expanded into residential projects for select clients. When Grandpa's health began to decline last year, I visited him every day at his sprawling Victorian home on Maple Avenue. His housekeeper Margaret would make us tea, and we'd sit in the solarium watching the birds at the feeders he kept meticulously filled. I've lived a good life, Audrey, he said one afternoon as the spring sunshine streamed through the windows. Built things that will stand long after I'm gone. But the real legacy isn't the buildings. It's the family. I finished for him, reaching for his increasingly frail hand. He nodded, his blue eyes still sharp despite his weakening body. Family is complicated. Not always what we hope for, but always what we have. 2 weeks before he passed, Derek suddenly became a daily visitor too. He'd bring expensive scotch that Grandpa's doctor had explicitly forbidden and spend hours behind the closed door of the study. When I'd arrive, Derek would emerge looking smug, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "Just making sure everything's taken care of, little sis," he'd say with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. Grandpa seemed distracted after these visits, sometimes confused. I mentioned it to his doctor, who attributed it to the progression of his heart condition and the medications. When the call came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, I somehow knew before answering. Grandpa had passed peacefully in his sleep, Margaret sobbing softly on the phone. By the time I arrived at the house, Derek was already there, rifling through Grandpa's desk drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked, still in my hastily thrown-on clothes. "Looking for his will," Derek said without looking up. "We need to get the funeral arrangements started." Something felt off, but grief clouded my judgment. I focused instead on comforting Margaret, who had worked for Grandpa for 27 years and was taking his loss particularly hard. The funeral was exactly what Grandpa would have wanted, dignified, understated, with actual friends outnumbering business associates. Derek gave a surprisingly emotional eulogy that had many guests wiping away tears. I spoke too, sharing stories of chess games and life lessons, my voice breaking only once when I described how he taught me to change a tire in the pouring rain when I was 16 because independence matters more than comfort. As we stood at the cemetery watching the casket being lowered, Derek put his arm around me. "He loved you, Udi," he said, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. "We're going to be okay." I wanted to believe him. I wanted my brother back, the one who had taught me to ride a bike before he became obsessed with status and shortcuts. Little did I know, the worst betrayal was yet to come. The first red flag appeared 3 days after the funeral. I'd gone to Grandpa's house to help Margaret select photos for a memorial album. In his study, something felt different. The books were aligned too perfectly on the shelves, the papers on his desk too neatly stacked. Grandpa had always maintained what he called organized chaos. He knew where everything was, but to outsiders, it looked like a creative mess. "Has someone been in here, organizing?" I asked Margaret. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Your brother. Spent hours in here yesterday while I was grocery shopping. Said he was looking for important documents." I ran my fingers along the edge of Grandpa's desk, stopping at the antique letter opener he'd brought back from a trip to Italy decades ago. "Did he find anything?" "If he did, he didn't share it with me," Margaret said. "But he left with his briefcase, looking fuller than when he arrived." As I pulled open the bottom drawer, where Grandpa kept family photos, my phone rang. Rebecca Winters, Grandpa's attorney for the past 20 years, was calling. "Audrey, I need to speak with you," she said, her usually warm voice sounding strained. "It's about your grandfather's estate." "Of course," I replied. "When would you like to meet?" "The sooner the better. There's something unusual happening." Before I could press for details, she had to take another call, promising to be in touch later that day. I continued sorting through photographs, finding one from my college graduation with Grandpa beaming proudly beside me. As I slipped it into my purse, my phone dinged with a text from Derek. "Family meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Mom and Dad's house. Important news." That evening, I arrived at my parents' colonial-style home to find Derek's Range Rover already in the driveway alongside our parents' vehicles. Inside, Derek was standing by the fireplace, a document folder in his hands, and an expression of solemn importance on his face. Our parents sat on the sofa, looking confused but expectant. "Good you're here," Derek said as I entered. "We can begin." "Begin what?" I asked, taking a seat in the armchair opposite my parents. Derek cleared his throat theatrically. "I found Grandpa's will yesterday. He asked me to keep it safe until after the funeral." My father frowned. Why wouldn't he leave it with Rebecca? She's handled all his legal affairs for years. "He had his reasons," Derek said dismissively. "The important thing is that I've reviewed it with my attorney, and everything's in order." He pulled a document from the folder and began reading. According to this will, Derek would receive 90% of Grandpa's considerable estate, including the construction company, real estate holdings, and investment accounts. I was to receive the house on Maple Avenue and a modest cash bequest. Our parents would get small cash gifts, and a few minor donations would go to charities. My mother gasped, "That doesn't sound like your grandfather at all. He always stressed treating you both equally." Derek shrugged. "People change, Mom. Grandpa and I spent a lot of time together these past few months. He came to see that I was ready to take over his legacy." I sat in stunned silence, my mind racing. This couldn't be right. Not only did it contradict everything Grandpa had ever said about his intentions, but it also went against his core values. "Where's Rebecca?" I finally asked. "Shouldn't she be handling this?" Derek's smile tightened. "Rebecca's services won't be necessary. My attorney has already submitted the will to probate. He's expediting everything so we can get the business transition underway immediately." "This doesn't make sense," I insisted. "Just last month, Grandpa told me he was updating his will with Rebecca. He specifically mentioned the charitable foundation he was setting up." "Well, clearly he changed his mind," Derek snapped, his momentary mask of compassion slipping. "This will is dated just 2 weeks before he died, and it's notarized. It's legally binding." My father reached for the document, his engineering mind always detail-oriented. "May I see that, son?" Derek hesitated before handing it over. "It's all in order, Dad." As my parents examined the will, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Don't agree to anything. Will in Derek's possession is suspicious. Call me ASAP." I excused myself to use the bathroom and immediately called Rebecca. She answered on the first ring. "Audrey, thank God. Your grandfather updated his will with me 3 months ago. He never mentioned changing it again. If Derek has a different will, I have serious concerns about its authenticity. What should I do?" I whispered, aware that Derek might be listening. "Say nothing for now. I'm contacting Harold Reynolds, the executor your grandfather appointed. We need to investigate this properly." When I returned to the living room, Derek was showing our parents a spreadsheet of Grandpa's assets and explaining how quickly they could be liquidated. "We'll need to sell the commercial properties right away," he was saying. "I've already got buyers interested." "Slow down," my father said. "Nothing should happen until we've gone through proper channels." Derek's face hardened. "The will is clear, Dad. I'm in charge now." Later that night, as I was leaving my parents' house, I noticed an envelope had been slipped under my windshield wiper. Inside was a receipt from Sentinel Security for installation services at Grandpa's address, dated just 3 months ago. Scrawled on the back in unfamiliar handwriting were the words, "Check the safe deposit box at First National. Box number 247. The next morning, I received a call from an unknown number. "Is this Audrey Bennett?" a man's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "Someone who respected your grandfather," the voice replied. "Check the safe deposit box at First National Bank. Malcolm left insurance." Before I could ask anything else, the caller hung up. Derek was moving fast. By that afternoon, he had already visited Bennett Construction and introduced himself to the executive team as the new owner. He'd also contacted Grandpa's investment manager about transferring control of the accounts. When I tried calling Rebecca again, her assistant informed me she was in meetings all day, but had left a message. "Harold Reynolds is taking over. Meeting scheduled for next Tuesday at 10 a.m. All parties must attend." I didn't know who to trust or what to believe. The brother who had always been financially irresponsible was suddenly poised to control everything our grandfather had built. Something was very wrong, and I had a growing suspicion that Grandpa had anticipated it. First thing Monday morning, I called my college friend Stephanie Martinez, who had become one of the city's most respected estate attorneys. After swearing her to confidentiality, I explained the situation. "This sounds highly suspicious," Stephanie said, her professional demeanor momentarily slipping. "A new will appearing after death, cutting out a previously favored heir, changing executors. These are all red flags in my business. What should I do?" I asked, pacing my living room. "First, we need to see what's in that safe deposit box. If your grandfather left something there specifically for you to find, it could be crucial. Then we need to stall any asset transfers until we can authenticate this supposed new will. With Stephanie's guidance, I headed to First National Bank, where the manager, Thomas Wilson, greeted me with a solemn handshake. Miss Bennett, I was very sorry to hear about your grandfather. He was a gentleman of the old school.
Thank you, Thomas.
I need to access a safe deposit box that may be in his name. Box number 247. Thomas checked his computer. Yes, that box exists, and you're listed as an authorized user along with Malcolm himself. Interesting, it was only created 3 months ago. My pulse quickened. 3 months ago? Can I see it now? Thomas led me to the vault and helped me retrieve the box. Once alone in the private viewing room, I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting, a small digital voice recorder, and a USB drive labeled Insurance Policy. I opened the envelope first. My dear Audrey, if you're reading this, then my suspicions about your brother have proven correct. Derek has been in financial trouble for some time, more serious than even you know. Gambling debts, failed investments, loans from dangerous people. He's desperate, and desperate people make terrible choices. I've installed security cameras in my study and other key areas of the house. The footage is backed up to the enclosed drive. I've also recorded our recent conversations. The voice recorder contains something you'll need. Trust Harold Reynolds. He's been my friend for 40 years and is beyond reproach. All my love, Grandpa. I plugged the USB drive into my laptop and found dozens of video files, organized by date. Clicking on one from 2 weeks before Grandpa's death, I watched in horror as Derek entered the study late at night, searched through Grandpa's desk, and photographed documents with his phone. In another video, dated just 3 days before Grandpa died, Derek could be seen replacing papers in Grandpa's filing cabinet, looking nervously over his shoulder. The voice recorder contained a conversation between Grandpa and Derek where my brother was asking for a loan of $50,000 to cover some temporary cash flow issues. Grandpa refused, telling Derek he needed to solve his own problems for once. Derek's voice turned cold, threatening to sell stories about family secrets to the local press if Grandpa didn't help him. Armed with this evidence, I next tracked down the security company from the receipt. The technician who had worked with Grandpa, Jason Morales, agreed to meet me for coffee. Your grandfather was very specific about the installation, Jason explained. Cameras with night vision covering his desk, filing cabinets, and safe. All footage backed up to a secure cloud server that only he could access, plus local storage on a hidden drive. Did he tell you why? I asked. Jason hesitated. It's not my business to ask clients why they want security, but your grandfather volunteered that he was concerned about documents going missing. Said something about protecting his legacy. I thanked Jason and headed to my parents' house, where I found them sitting in uncharacteristic silence at the kitchen table. Derek's been making calls to real estate agents about listing Grandpa's properties, my father said without preamble. He's talking about dissolving the construction company and selling off the assets. That business employs over 100 people, I protested. Some have worked there for decades. We know, honey, my mother said, her eyes red from crying. But if the will is legitimate, there's nothing we can do. I took a deep breath. I don't think the will is legitimate, and I have evidence suggesting Derek may have forged it. I showed them the letter and explained about the security footage. My father's face grew increasingly grim, while my mother began to sob quietly. I don't want to believe this, Dad said, his voice rough with emotion. But Malcolm was always concerned about Derek's financial decisions. This would explain a lot. As we were talking, the front door banged open and Derek stormed in, waving a piece of paper. What the hell is this? He demanded, thrusting the document at me. It was a temporary injunction preventing any sale or transfer of Grandpa's assets pending the official will reading. Just making sure everything proceeds properly, I said, surprised by my own calm. Derek's face contorted with rage. You're interfering with MY inheritance. I've already got buyers lined up. People are counting on this money. What people, Derek? My father asked quietly. What have you promised? My brother seemed to catch himself, forcing his features into a more controlled expression. Business associates. Opportunities that won't wait. And now my own sister is trying to sabotage me. He pointed a finger at me. Drop this now, Audrey, or you'll regret it. You have no idea what you're getting into. After Derek stormed out, my mother turned to me with frightened eyes. Audrey, be careful. I've never seen him like this. Later that afternoon, I met with Margaret at a cafe far from any of our usual haunts. The loyal housekeeper had brought a small notebook with her. I've kept a diary of everything that happened in that house for the past 20 years, she explained, sliding it across the table. Your grandfather knew. Said it might be important someday. The notebook contained detailed entries about Derek's visits, including times he arrived after Margaret had supposedly left for the day. She had secretly observed him searching the study, photographing documents, and once practicing your grandfather's signature on a blank piece of paper. The last entry is the most disturbing, Margaret said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The night before your grandfather passed, Derek brought him a glass of scotch. I thought it strange since the doctor had forbidden alcohol with his medication. After Derek left, I was going to take the glass away, but your grandfather stopped me. He poured it into a plant when Derek wasn't looking and asked me to rinse the glass immediately.
A chill ran down my spine.
Are you suggesting? Margaret shook her head firmly. I'm not suggesting anything, Miss Audrey. I'm just telling you what I saw. That evening, I found a note tucked under my apartment door. Back off or everyone loses. The handwriting matched the signature on Derek's version of the will. By Thursday, Derek had launched a full offensive. My parents called to tell me he'd been to visit them again, this time with his attorney. He's saying you've always been jealous of his relationship with your grandfather, Mom said, her voice tight with stress. That you're trying to delay the inevitable because you can't accept being cut out. You don't believe that, do you? I asked, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Of course not, honey. But he's so convincing, and he has that will with your grandfather's signature. It's not Grandpa's signature, I insisted. It's a forgery. We want to believe you, my father interjected, having picked up another extension. But without proof. I nearly told them about the security footage then, but something held me back. The fewer people who knew about my evidence before the official will reading, the better. The situation deteriorated further when I arrived at my design studio the next morning to find my assistant Megan looking uncomfortable. What's wrong? I asked as I hung on my coat. 2 clients called to cancel their projects this morning, she said, avoiding my eyes. And Mrs. Harrington stopped by to say she's heard concerning things about the business and wants to postpone her consultation. What concerning things? Megan handed me her phone, open to a local gossip blog. There was a post suggesting that Bennett Interior Design was facing financial difficulties due to family estate problems and that clients should be wary of paying deposits. The source was anonymous, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Over the next few days, 3 more clients canceled. Then my landlord called to verify rumors that I was planning to close the business and move away. By Friday, it was clear that Derek was systematically undermining my professional reputation. That afternoon, I returned to my car after meeting with a still loyal client to find a note under my windshield wiper. Last warning. Some debts can only be paid one way. I was considering calling the police when my phone rang with an unknown number. Is this Audrey Bennett? A gruff male voice asked. Who's calling? I replied warily. Name's Frank Donovan. I'm a business associate of your brother's. He owes me a considerable sum, which he promised to repay after your grandfather's estate is settled. Any delays are problematic. My blood ran cold. I'm not responsible for my brother's debts, Mr. Donovan. Perhaps not legally, he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't about legalities. But family takes care of family, doesn't it? Make sure this probate process goes smoothly, Miss Bennett. For everyone's sake. The call ended, leaving me shaking. Derek wasn't just desperate for money. He was in danger. And now, potentially, so was I. I drove directly to Stephanie's law office, where she listened to my account of the escalating threats with growing concern. This goes beyond estate fraud, she said, taking careful notes. We need to document everything and possibly get police involvement. Not yet, I decided. The will reading is Tuesday. Let's see what happens there first. Over the weekend, I discovered that Derek had somehow obtained a key to Grandpa's lake house and was showing it to potential buyers, despite the injunction. When I drove up there to confront him, I found a for sale by owner sign already posted at the entrance to the property. Inside, Derek was walking a middle-aged couple through the rustic living room where our family had spent countless summers. As you can see, it's prime lakefront property, he was saying. Over 3 acres with 200 feet of private shoreline. We're asking $2 million, but for a quick cash sale, I could go to 1.8. Derek, what are you doing? I demanded, stepping into the room. This property isn't yours to sell. The couple looked between us uncomfortably as Derek's smile became rigid. My sister is having some trouble accepting our grandfather's final wishes, he told them smoothly. Perhaps we could continue this tour another time? After they left, Derek rounded on me. You're making a huge mistake, Audrey. I have powerful friends and dangerous enemies. Neither will be happy if you keep interfering. Is that why you're selling Grandpa's treasured lake house to strangers? To pay off your gambling debts to men like Frank Donovan. Derek's face drained of color. How do you know about Frank? He called me. Seems you've promised money you don't have yet. That's a dangerous game, Derek. For a moment, my brother's confident facade crumbled, and I glimpsed genuine fear in his eyes. Then his expression hardened again. You have no idea what's at stake here. By Tuesday afternoon, I'll have control of everything. The companies, the properties, the investments. If you're smart, you'll stop fighting me and accept the little Grandpa left you. Grandpa would never have cut me out like that, and you know it, I said quietly. Derek laughed, but there was no humor in it. Grandpa isn't here anymore. And the only thing that matters is that piece of paper with his signature on it. Sunday night, I met my parents for dinner at their house. They seemed to have aged years in just days. We found this in the mailbox, my father said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside was a stack of photos showing Derek at various casinos, in heated conversations with men in expensive suits, and one particularly disturbing image of him being escorted into an alley behind a nightclub, looking terrified. There was a note, Mom said, her voice barely audible. It said, "Your son owes the wrong people. Payment expected by Wednesday, or we collect another way." The implication was clear. If Derek didn't get Grandpa's money, he could be in serious physical danger. Despite everything, he was still my brother. The will reading is Tuesday, I reminded them. Harold Reynolds will sort this all out. And if the will Derek found is legitimate? Dad asked. I took a deep breath. Then I'll accept it. But it's not. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Lake House.
Now.
Important. Attached was a photo of Grandpa's journal, which I hadn't seen since his death. It was almost certainly a trap, but the journal might contain crucial information. I called Stephanie, who insisted on coming with me, and alerting a police friend to be on standby. We drove to the lake house in tense silence, arriving just after midnight. The house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen. I used my key to enter, Stephanie close behind me. Derek was sitting at the kitchen table, Grandpa's leather-bound journal open before him, a half-empty bottle of scotch by his elbow. I knew you'd come for this, he slurred, tapping the journal. Always were Grandpa's favorite. Always did the right thing. Derek, this has to stop, I said, remaining near the door. You're putting yourself in danger. These people you owe money to won't wait forever. Don't you think I know that? He shouted, suddenly angry. Why do you think I'm doing this? They'll kill me, Audrey. Actually kill me. Then let me help you, I pleaded. We can go to the police, work something out. Derek laughed bitterly. The police can't protect me from these people. Only money can. Millions, not thousands. And forging Grandpa's will seem like the answer? Stephanie asked, speaking for the first time. Derek's eyes narrowed. Who's this? Your lawyer? Jesus, Audrey, you really came prepared. I'm trying to protect you from yourself, I said, taking a careful step forward. Give me the journal, come with us, and we'll figure this out together. For a moment, I thought he might agree. Then his face twisted into a snarl. Too late for that. Way too late. He lunged across the table, grabbing the journal and shoving past us. By the time we got outside, his car was already speeding down the gravel driveway, spraying stones in its wake. That went well, Stephanie remarked dryly. Back in my apartment, I couldn't sleep. Derek was cornered and desperate, which made him more dangerous than ever. The will reading was less than 36 hours away, and I had no idea what he might do next. Tuesday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in a charcoal gray suit that Grandpa had always said made me look formidable in the best way. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, my good luck charms for important meetings. The law offices of Reynolds and Associates occupied the entire 14th floor of the city's most prestigious office building. The reception area featured subdued lighting, leather furniture, and discreet awards acknowledging Harold Reynolds' 50 years of legal excellence. I arrived 20 minutes early, but Derek was already there, looking immaculate in an expensive navy suit that couldn't quite hide the dark circles under his eyes. Beside him sat his attorney, Gabriel Wright, a man known for representing wealthy clients with questionable ethics. On Derek's other side was his girlfriend Tiffany Collins, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. Audrey, Derek acknowledged me with a curt nod. I see you've come alone. I don't need backup to hear the truth, I replied, taking a seat across from them. Over the next 15 minutes, the reception area filled with family members. Our parents arrived, both looking uncomfortable in formal attire they rarely wore. Dad nodded encouragingly at me while Mom squeezed my hand before sitting down. Uncle Robert, Grandpa's younger brother, came with his wife Susan. Cousin Jennifer, who had worked in accounting at Bennett Construction for a decade, slipped in quietly and chose a seat near me. How are you holding up? She whispered. Ask me again in an hour, I murmured back. The tension in the room was palpable. Derek kept checking his watch while his attorney reviewed documents in a leather portfolio. Tiffany scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing Derek something that made him frown deeper. At precisely 10 o'clock, the inner office door opened, and Harold Reynolds emerged. At 78, he stood ramrod straight, his silver hair immaculately styled, his three-piece suit a testament to old-world tailoring. Thank you all for coming, he said, his resonant voice commanding immediate attention. Malcolm Bennett was not only my client, but my dear friend for over 40 years. Today we gather to honor his final wishes and distribute his estate according to his legally executed will. He gestured toward the conference room. Please follow me. We'll proceed in a methodical and transparent manner. The large conference room featured a long mahogany table with enough seating for everyone present. At the far end was a screen for presentations. Harold took his position at the head of the table, with his assistant Julia positioned nearby with a laptop. Before we begin, Harold said once everyone was seated, I want to clarify the legal process we're following. Malcolm's estate is substantial and complex. My role as executor is to ensure his wishes are carried out exactly as he intended, without deviation or interpretation. Derek shifted impatiently. We're familiar with the process, Mr. Reynolds. Can we proceed to the reading? Harold fixed him with a steady gaze. All in due time, Mr. Bennett. Thoroughness is essential in matters of this importance. He continued his explanation, detailing the probate process, tax implications, and timeline for asset distribution. Derek grew increasingly agitated, whispering urgently to his attorney. Finally, Harold picked up a document folder. Now, I understand there has been some confusion regarding Malcolm's will. Mr. Derek Bennett has submitted a will dated 2 weeks before Malcolm's passing. This document substantially changes the distribution of assets from previous versions. That's the valid will, Derek's attorney interjected. Properly executed and notarized. Indeed, it appears to be properly executed, Harold acknowledged. However, Malcolm Bennett was nothing if not methodical. For 40 years, every legal document he executed was done in duplicate, with one copy retained in my firm's secure archives. Derek's confident smile faltered slightly. Interestingly, Harold continued, there is no duplicate of this will in our records. Furthermore, Malcolm did not inform me of any intention to substantially revise his estate plan in the weeks before his death. He didn't need to inform you, Derek snapped. He was of sound mind and could change his will whenever he wanted. Quite right, Harold agreed mildly. However, Miss Bennet has brought some concerning evidence to my attention. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed envelope from the safe deposit box, handing it to Harold. My grandfather left this for me to find. Harold opened the envelope and reviewed its contents briefly before looking up. This letter suggests Malcolm suspected someone might attempt to falsify his wishes after his death. He took precautionary measures, including installing security cameras in his home office. Derek's face drained of color. Additionally, Harold continued, Miss Bennet has provided me with a USB drive containing video footage that appears to show someone in Malcolm's study late at night, practicing his signature and photographing documents. This is ridiculous, Derek's attorney protested. Any such footage would be inadmissible without proper chain of custody. Perhaps in court, Harold conceded. But we're not in court yet, Mr. Wright. We're attempting to determine Malcolm Bennett's true final wishes. Harold nodded to his assistant, who connected a laptop to the conference room's display system. I think we should review this footage before proceeding. This is outrageous. Derek stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I won't sit here and be accused of forgery by my own sister. No one has accused you of anything yet, Mr. Bennet, Harold said calmly. Please be seated. The screen flickered to life, showing Grandpa's study from an overhead angle. The timestamp indicated 2:17 a.m., 3 days before his death. A figure entered the room, unmistakably Derek, and went directly to the desk. He opened a drawer, removed a document, and replaced it with another that looked similar. The camera zoomed in as he carefully positioned the papers to look undisturbed. The room was utterly silent as the footage played. My mother let out a small, pained sound. My father sat rigid, his expression unreadable. Derek stared at the screen, his face a mask of fury and fear. There's more, Harold said quietly as the first clip ended. This was recorded the day before Malcolm passed away. The next clip showed Derek and Tiffany in the study. Derek was holding a document up to the light, pointing out something to Tiffany, who nodded and took it from him. She sat at Grandpa's desk and appeared to be signing something, then handed it back to Derek, who inspected it and smiled. Turn it off, Derek demanded, his voice strangled. This is all fabricated. It's from your grandfather's security system, Harold replied. The cameras were professionally installed by Sentinel Security 3 months ago. He turned to face Derek directly. Mr. Bennet, did you create a fraudulent will and forge your grandfather's signature on it? Derek's attorney quickly intervened. My client doesn't have to answer that. This entire proceeding is becoming inappropriate. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. Your client may need to answer that question very soon, but in a different venue. Detective Sarah Rodriguez of the Financial Crimes Unit stood in the doorway, her badge visible on her belt. Behind her was a uniformed officer. I have a warrant to seize all documents related to the will of Malcolm Bennet, she announced, stepping into the room. We've received evidence of potential fraud and forgery. Derek jumped to his feet again. This is all her fault, he shouted, pointing at me. Arrest her. She stole everything. She's been manipulating Grandpa for years, turning him against me. I sat calmly, meeting my brother's wild gaze steadily. Please sit down, Mr. Bennet, Detective Rodriguez said firmly. No one is being arrested at this moment. We're gathering evidence. Harold cleared his throat. If I may, Detective, I was about to present Malcolm Bennett's actual final will, which has been in my firm's possession since it was executed 3 months ago. He removed a document from a different folder, this one bearing the Reynolds and Associates seal. This is the true last will and testament of Malcolm Bennet, properly witnessed, notarized, and recorded with the courts. Derek collapsed back into his chair, his face ashen. The conference room had transformed from a space of formal legal proceedings to something resembling a crime scene. Detective Rodriguez stationed her officer by the door while she conferred quietly with Harold. Derek's attorney was frantically whispering advice to his client, who seemed beyond hearing it. Tiffany had edged her chair slightly away from Derek, her perfectly composed facade beginning to crack. My parents sat holding hands, their expressions a mixture of shock and grief. Uncle Robert looked grimly vindicated, while Cousin Jennifer was openly weeping. I felt oddly detached, as though watching the scene from a distance. The betrayal hurt, of course, but some part of me had known for years that Derek was capable of this. Perhaps that's why Grandpa had prepared so carefully. Harold returned to his position at the head of the table. With the detective's permission, I'd like to proceed with reading Malcolm's authentic will. The investigation into the fraudulent document will continue separately. Detective Rodriguez nodded her agreement, taking a seat near the door. The last will and testament of Malcolm Andrew Bennett, Harold began, his voice steady and formal. Being of sound mind and body, I hereby declare this to be my final will, revoking all previous wills and codicils. He proceeded through the standard legal preamble before reaching the distribution of assets. The authentic will was starkly different from Derek's version. Grandpa had divided his estate much more equitably. The family business, Bennett Construction, would remain intact with its current management team. 50% ownership would go to me, 25% to Cousin Jennifer, who had worked there for years, and 25% would be distributed among long-term employees through a carefully structured stock ownership plan. The real estate holdings would be divided equally between Derek and me, with strict conditions attached to Derek's portion. His properties would be managed by a trust until he demonstrated financial responsibility through specific milestones, including steady employment and debt reduction. Grandpa's liquid assets would be divided 3 ways: 1/3 to our parents, 1/3 to me, and 1/3 to Derek, again held in trust with controlled disbursements. Most significantly, Grandpa had established the Bennett Family Foundation, endowed with $20 million from his investment portfolio. The foundation would support education for underprivileged youth and affordable housing initiatives, causes Grandpa had quietly supported for decades. I was named as the foundation's director, with an advisory board that included several community leaders. As Harold read through these provisions, Derek's expressions cycled through disbelief, rage, and finally, defeat. His attorney had stopped taking notes and was staring at his client with barely concealed disgust. There are several personal bequests as well, Harold continued. To my loyal housekeeper, Margaret Wilson, I leave $500,000 and lifetime residency rights in the carriage house on my property, should she wish to remain there. Margaret, who had been quietly sitting in the corner, gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. To my brother Robert and his wife Susan, I leave my art collection and $1 million. To my dear friend Harold Reynolds, I leave my first edition Hemingway collection, which we've discussed so often over the years. Harold paused briefly, emotion crossing his face before he composed himself and continued. To my granddaughter Audrey, in addition to the assets already specified, I leave my personal journals, my collection of chess sets, and this message. You understood what truly matters. Guard the legacy, not just the assets. I blinked back tears, hearing Grandpa's voice so clearly in those words. And to my grandson Derek, Harold read, his tone unchanging, I leave this message. I never gave up hope that you would find your way. The trusts established in this will are not punishments, but opportunities to rebuild. When you are ready to build rather than take, you'll find the support you need. Derek stared down at the table, his shoulders slumped. There is one final clause, Harold said, turning to the last page. Malcolm added this just before signing. If any beneficiary contests this will or attempts to circumvent its provisions through fraudulent means, their entire inheritance shall be forfeited and redistributed to the Bennett Family Foundation. The implications of this last clause hung heavy in the air. If Derek's forgery attempt was legally established, he would lose everything Grandpa had left him. Given the evidence presented today, Harold said carefully, I feel obligated to inform the court about the apparent attempt to submit a fraudulent will. However, as executor, I have some discretion in how and when this information is presented." He looked directly at Derek. Malcolm Bennett believed in second chances, even when they weren't deserved. "Before any irreversible decisions are made, I would strongly advise you to consult with a criminal defense attorney, separate from your estate counsel." Derek finally looked up, his face haggard. "It doesn't matter now. They'll kill me anyway." "Who will kill you?" Detective Rodriguez asked sharply. "The people I owe," Derek admitted, his voice hollow. "I'm in for nearly $2 million to some very dangerous men. They've given me until tomorrow to pay." "That's why you were so desperate to sell everything immediately," I realized aloud. Derek nodded miserably. "I kept losing, trying to win it back. Then I borrowed more, thinking I could turn it around. When Grandpa got sick, I saw a way out." "By stealing from your family?" our father asked, speaking for the first time since the footage was shown. "I was going to pay it back," Derek insisted, though no one believed him. "Once I was clear of the debt, I would have made things right." "That's not how it works, son," Dad said sadly. Detective Rodriguez stood up. "Mr. Bennett, I need you to come with me to the station to answer some questions about these gambling debts. The forgery investigation will proceed separately, but organized crime connections take precedence." As she led Derek toward the door, he stopped beside my chair. "I'm sorry, Audrey," he said quietly. "I never meant for it to go this far." I couldn't bring myself to respond. Years of lies and manipulation couldn't be erased with one apology. After Derek left with the detective, Harold continued with the administrative details of the estate. The authentic will would be filed with the probate court, and asset transfers would begin once the legal process was complete. The Bennett Family Foundation would be established immediately, with initial funding from accounts not subject to probate. As the meeting concluded, family members approached me one by one. Uncle Robert squeezed my shoulder wordlessly. Cousin Jennifer hugged me tight, whispering, "Grandpa would be proud of you." My parents embraced me together, all three of us releasing tears we'd been holding back. "We should have believed you from the start," Mom said, her voice breaking. "We just couldn't imagine Derek would go so far." "He's still our son," Dad added heavily. "But what he did was unforgivable." "Grandpa didn't give up on him," I reminded them. "The trust provisions give him a path forward, if he chooses to take it." After everyone else had left, Harold asked me to stay behind. From his desk drawer, he removed a small box with my name written on it in Grandpa's handwriting. "Malcolm asked me to give you this privately, after the will reading." Inside was Grandpa's pocket watch, the one he'd carried every day for 50 years. Attached was a note. "Time is the most valuable asset. Use yours wisely as you always have. I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become." "He knew, didn't he?" I asked Harold. "He knew Derek would try something like this." Harold nodded gravely. Malcolm was no fool. He saw the path Derek was on long ago. The security cameras, the duplicate will, the detailed records, he was preparing evidence, while still hoping it wouldn't be needed. Why not just confront Derek directly? He tried, many times. But Malcolm believed people must make their own choices and face their own consequences. All he could do was ensure the truth would eventually come to light. As I left the building clutching Grandpa's watch, I felt both vindicated and heartbroken. The family would never be the same, but perhaps in time, something stronger could be rebuilt from the ashes of Derek's betrayal. The weeks following the will reading unfolded in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and difficult conversations. Derek faced multiple charges, including forgery, fraud, and criminal conspiracy related to his gambling debts. Thanks to his cooperation with authorities investigating the loan sharks who had threatened him, he was offered a plea deal, 18 months probation, mandatory gambling addiction treatment, and restitution payments. The family agreed not to invoke the clause that would have disinherited him completely. As Grandpa had written, the trust restrictions weren't punishment but protection, both for Derek and the family legacy. I moved into Grandpa's house on Maple Avenue, finding comfort in the familiar spaces where we'd spent so much time together. Margaret continued living in the carriage house, and her presence helped make the transition easier. Some mornings, I'd find her in the kitchen making Grandpa's favorite cinnamon pancakes, both of us pretending the gesture wasn't making us teary-eyed. One rainy afternoon in April, about 2 months after the will reading, I was sorting through Grandpa's extensive library when the doorbell rang. My parents stood on the porch, looking uncertain. "We've just come from visiting Derek at the treatment center," Mom explained as I led them into the living room. He's doing better. Taking it seriously." "That's good," I said, meaning it despite everything. "Does he still have those people after him?" Dad shook his head. The investigation led to several arrests. Apparently, Derek wasn't their only victim, just the most desperate. He's safe from that threat, at least. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before Mom spoke again. "We're sorry, Audrey, for doubting you, for not seeing what was happening with Derek sooner. We should have been better parents to both of you." "You did your best," I said, the words releasing something tight in my chest. "Grandpa used to say that family is both our greatest strength and our greatest blind spot." "He was a wise man," Dad murmured. "I miss him every day." We spent the afternoon looking through old photo albums, remembering happier times when our family was whole. The path to forgiveness would be long, but this felt like a start. The following week, I visited Derek at the residential treatment facility. He looked thinner, his designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt, but his eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. "Thanks for coming," he said as we sat in the center's garden. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you never wanted to see me again." "We're still family," I replied simply. Derek nodded, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "I've been doing a lot of thinking in here. About why I did what I did. It wasn't just about the money."
"No."
"I was jealous of you," he admitted, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away. "Not just of your relationship with Grandpa, but of how easily everything seemed to come to you. The business success, the respect, the sense of purpose. I felt like I was constantly failing while you were constantly winning." "It wasn't easy, Derek. I worked 80-hour weeks for years. I made mistakes and learned from them instead of running away." "I know that now," he said quietly. "The therapist here is helping me see how I've been blaming everyone else for my problems, taking shortcuts instead of doing the work." We talked for nearly 2 hours, more honestly than we had in years. There were moments of anger and tears, but also brief glimpses of the brother I remembered from childhood, the one who had taught me to ride a bike and defended me from playground bullies. As I was leaving, Derek asked, "Do you think we'll ever be okay again? As a family?" "I don't know," I answered truthfully. But Grandpa never gave up hope, so neither will I. Establishing the Bennett Family Foundation became my passion project. I assembled a board that included community leaders in education and housing, along with cousin Jennifer representing the family. Our first initiative provided scholarships for trade school education in construction-related fields, creating a pipeline of skilled workers for Bennett construction while changing lives. 6 months after Grandpa's death, we held the official foundation launch event at the city's Botanical Gardens, a place he had helped fund and visited often. Nearly 300 people attended, including former employees, business associates, and recipients of Grandpa's quiet generosity over the decades. During my speech, I spotted my parents in the audience, and beside them, to my surprise, was Derek. He had completed the residential portion of his treatment program and was now in outpatient therapy while working at a friend's landscaping business, manual labor that he claimed was helping him sleep better than he had in years. Malcolm Bennett understood that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, I told the crowd. It's measured in impact, in lives changed, in communities strengthened. This foundation is not just named in his honor, it's built on his principles of hard work, integrity, and giving back. After the event, Derek approached me cautiously. "That was a beautiful speech. Grandpa would have loved it." "Thank you," I said, surprised by his sincerity. "How are you doing?" "One day at a time," he replied with a small smile. "The landscaping job is actually pretty great. Building things instead of just buying them. I think Grandpa would approve." "He would," I agreed. That night, alone in Grandpa's study, now my study, I opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed a leather-bound journal I hadn't yet had the heart to read. It was his last one, covering the final months of his life. I poured a small glass of his favorite scotch and began turning the pages. Much of it contained business notes and observations about his declining health, but toward the end, there was a section titled, "For Audrey When I'm Gone." "My dearest girl," he had written in his distinctive slanted script. "If you're reading this, then the storm I anticipated has likely come to pass. I hope I'm wrong about Derek's intentions, but I've seen the desperation in his eyes. Desperate men make dangerous choices. Whatever has happened, remember this. Family wounds cut deepest, but can also heal strongest. Your brother is lost, not evil. I've tried to build safeguards that protect you both, him from his worst impulses, you from the fallout of his choices. The foundation is my true legacy, and you are its perfect steward. Use it wisely. Build something lasting. And when you can, help your brother find his way back. Not for his sake, but for yours. Carrying anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. I've lived a good, long life filled with more blessings than any man deserves. Chief among them has been watching you grow into a woman of such strength and compassion. Lead with both, always. All my love, now and forever. Grandpa." I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. Even from beyond, he was still teaching me, still guiding me forward. 1 year to the day after Grandpa's passing, our entire family, including Derek, gathered at the lake house for a memorial dinner. The property had been preserved, not sold, and would remain a place for family gatherings as Grandpa had always intended. As we shared memories and stories around the large oak table where so many family meals had been enjoyed, I realized we were slowly healing. The trust between us was fragile, being rebuilt one honest conversation at a time. Derek was 9 months sober from gambling and working steadily. My parents were finding their balance again. The business was thriving under shared leadership. None of us were the same people we had been before Grandpa's death and the crisis that followed. The experience had broken us, but we were remaking ourselves and our relationships with clearer eyes and stronger foundations. After dinner, I stepped onto the dock alone, watching the sunset paint the lake in golds and pinks. I could almost feel Grandpa beside me, smell his cologne on the evening breeze. "We're going to be okay," I whispered to the fading light. "All of us. Thank you for preparing the way." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I thought about legacy. Not the financial kind, but the values and lessons that outlive us. Grandpa had left me far more than money or property. He'd shown me how to face difficult truths with courage, how to stand firm when it would be easier to bend, and ultimately, how to find forgiveness when it seemed impossible. That was the real inheritance, and it was priceless. Have you ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it meant going against family? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story of betrayal and healing resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that families can heal, even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that sometimes the strongest families are those that have been broken and rebuilt.